With an overnight tripling of its annual budget and intensifying pressure to increase deportations, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement is racing to expand its detention space with temporary tent-like structures, despite safety warnings. Congress allocated $45 billion to spend locking up immigrants over the next 4 years, more than the government spent on detention during the Obama, Biden, and first Trump administrations combined, federal data show. The bill also includes $46.5 billion for building the wall along the U.S.-Mexico border and $6 billion for border technology and surveillance, along with other border security and immigration measures. This is the most funding we have seen for a border immigration agenda in the history of the country, said Lauren Brookhuizen, who researches criminal justice and incarceration in her role as a senior director at the Brennan Center for Justice at New York University School of Law. We are seeing a wholesale expansion of ICE detention centers. U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement officials say they plan to use the money to roughly double the nation's detention capacity to 100,000 beds, giving them more capacity to arrest undocumented immigrants targeted for deportation. The average daily population of ICE detainees rose to 56,000 last month, the highest number since ICE began releasing those figures during the first Trump administration, and administration officials have acknowledged the surge in immigrant detainees has sometimes outpaced their ability to accommodate all of them. This bill will make our communities safer by making a historic investment in our border security, Rep. Ruby Addison McDowell, R. North Carolina, said on the House floor Thursday morning. No more dangerous illegal aliens parading around with no consequences. In an emailed statement, Tricia McLaughlin, a spokeswoman for the Department of Homeland Security, said the money will help ICE pay for additional detention beds and ICE agents. She said the added resources and staffing are needed to secure the homeland and keep Americans safe. The U.S. immigrant detention system, the largest in the world, grew over the past 4 decades as a way to hold undocumented immigrants while they wait for their asylum claims or deportation cases to be processed. The network, which is largely composed of dozens of detention centers run by private contractors, as well as dozens of county jails that contract part of their facilities to ICE, has in the past mostly been populated by border crossers deemed a flight risk or migrants charged with a crime. During this Trump administration, however, as border crossings have dropped and ICE has increased arrests of people throughout the interior of the country, the detainee population is changing. As of June, about 1/3 of ICE detainees have never been charged with a criminal offense, and ICE is now arresting people with no criminal charges at a higher rate than people charged with crimes, according to Austin Coker, a research assistant professor at Syracuse University who studies immigration data. This year, ICE has already awarded new or expanded contracts to at least 9 facilities owned by the GEO Group or CoreCivic, the 2 largest detention contractors, as well as contracts to companies that house immigrants in makeshift tent structures. The House of Representatives Appropriations Committee recently called that prior spending budgetary mismanagement because it surpassed the agency's budget and forced the government to transfer funds that had been allotted to other agencies. Together, GEO and CoreCivic have at least 14 additional unused prisons which could be repurposed to hold thousands of ICE detainees in states including California, Colorado, North Carolina, and Oklahoma. The companies have said. In some places, the firms are already taking applications for hundreds of jobs they expect to fill when contracts are awarded, such as at an unused former prison owned by CoreCivic in Leavenworth, Kansas. Immigrant rights advocates are imploring the government not to award more contracts to GEO and CoreCivic, companies they say have failed to provide safe accommodations and adequate medical care to detainees. In recent weeks, immigrants protested what they said was a lack of adequate food and water at a GEO-owned facility in Newark, while detainees at a CoreCivic facility in Torrance County, New Mexico, complained they were not permitted to flush toilets for days at a time. Steve Owen, a spokesman for CoreCivic, said in an emailed statement that a water issue at the New Mexico facility was resolved within less than 2 weeks, and at no time were residents without drinking water or the ability to flush toilets. He said, CoreCivic facilities uphold federal standards and provide detainees with 3 nutritious meals per day and 24/7 access to medical care. GEO Group spokesman Christopher Ferreira said in an email that the company complies with all ICE detention standards and that its facilities, which provide around-the-clock access to medical care, food, and other services, are never overcrowded. At least 10 immigrants died while in ICE's custody during the first half of this year, a higher number than ICE reported for any full year since 2020, when 18 people died, according to the agency's mandated disclosures. McLaughlin declined to comment on the deaths. The share prices of GEO and CoreCivic each rose about 3% Thursday, as investors cheered the passage of congressional funding likely to result in a flurry of new contracts. On calls with Wall Street analysts this year, GEO Group executives have primed shareholders for a government contract bonanza that could boost annual revenue by more than 40% and profits by more than 60%. CoreCivic and GEO Group, through its political donations arm, each gave $500,000 to President Donald Trump's inauguration, according to Federal Election Commission data. ICE has indicated it also plans to rely on an array of more unconventional vendors to meet its detention goal. The agency last month published a list of more than 40 contractors that it had approved for an emergency acquisition process that will help facilitate speedy contract awards, Bloomberg News first reported. The list included 9 providers of tent structures, including Deployed Resources, which in April was awarded $3. $8 billion to build a migrant detention center on the Fort Bliss military base in Texas. While immigrant advocates have raised concerns about living conditions in tents, where it can be more difficult to provide ventilation and guard against harsh weather, the Trump administration has embraced these makeshift structures for the flexibility they offer. In April, when a Miami detention center became overcrowded, the facility erected a large white tent to hold hundreds of people. Trump planned to detain thousands of migrants in tents at Guantanamo Bay Naval Station, but so far the facility has been used only sparingly. This week, ICE said it was sending some migrants to live in tents at an airstrip in the Everglades. That facility, initially funded by Florida, will be reimbursed with funding from the Federal Emergency Management Agency, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi L. Noem said on Instagram. ICE expanding power, legal and ethical implications. Constitutional questions. Civil liberties organizations have filed early lawsuits claiming Fourth Amendment violations, unlawful searches, Zeitzeres, Fifth and 14th Amendment violations, due process, Eighth Amendment violations, cruel and unusual punishment via tent conditions, due process erosion. The new policies include expansion of expedited removal nationwide, not just near borders, increased use of notice to appear, documents without proper court assignment, disqualification from bond hearings as ICE labels many detainees as mandatory custody, disproportionate impact on vulnerable communities. Long-term undocumented residents with families and jobs face surprise detentions during check-ins. Asylum seekers are processed under remain in detention protocols rather than allowed supervised release. Immigrant youth, DACA recipients' family members, are swept up in broad workplace or community raids. Health and mental conditions are exacerbated in mass facilities where medical care is sparse and substandard. Private prisons and financial motives. Private detention companies are the biggest winners. With billions in new contracts, GEO Group and CoreCivic see record stock surges. Many executives sit on GOP-linked advisory boards or make campaign donations. Whistleblowers have already flagged profit-maximizing practices, underfeeding, medical delays, high guard to inmate ratios, international repercussions. Mexico and several Latin American countries have condemned mass ICE detentions, calling them politically motivated. The United Nations and Amnesty International are monitoring sites like Fort Bliss and Alligator Alcatraz for human rights violations. Migrant smuggling networks exploit the fear narrative to extract more money, worsening the crisis ICE claims to fight. Public response and protest. Civil society backlash is intensifying. Mass protests, court filings, whistleblower exposés, and viral videos from inside camps. Some Democratic governors are refusing to cooperate with ICE expansion plans in their states, citing state sovereignty and moral objections. Faith-based groups are creating underground railroads and legal defense networks to aid at-risk immigrants. Long-term consequences. Normalization of mass detention. What began as an emergency measure during immigration surges now risks becoming normalized infrastructure, permanently reshaping U.S. immigration enforcement. Legal precedents for future crackdowns. This wave sets the stage for use of mass detention against other groups, e.g., protesters, refugees, climate migrants, technological surveillance justified under immigration enforcement but applied broadly. Moral stain on American democracy. Parallels to Japanese internment, Operation Wetback, and Guantanamo Bay are increasingly drawn. The scale and intent of this policy challenge the idea of America as a defender of liberty, rights, and justice. Conclusion. A dangerous precedent. The $45 billion ICE detention blitz is not simply a budget increase, it is a declaration of values. It prioritizes incarceration over integration, fear over fairness, and power over protection. While pitched as national security, it potentially undermines the constitutional fabric of the United States and erodes the nation's commitment to human rights. What happens in these tent cities and hardened compounds will not remain isolated. It will define how the U.S. is remembered during this era of immigration reckoning.